welcome you all to this forum, and we have some special guests here. But before we get started, I would like to inform you that if you need to use the washrooms, they're at the rear here, rear right corner. And we would also like to let you know that we are here today because once again we feel the oppression of a government that does not care for those experiencing the devastating effects of poverty in our lives. Once again, they are using cutbacks to keep us oppressed and not able to purchase healthy foods and pay our rent or end up on the street. We are not second-class citizens. We all know that. We're not. But we tend to be treated that way. So welcome once more and be inspired by our three speakers today and be ready to have a voice with questions and sharing of how this affects your lives. But first of all, before we move on, we have some announcements to make. One thing we would request is that at some of these forums, some people tend to get a little carried away, so we would ask that you be respectful of the speakers that are here today and give them your undivided attention. They have put themselves out to come to this event. There are refreshments here. There's some coffee and at the back, and a variety of pizza and other goods will be served at a certain point in this program, and we will announce that. But right now, I'd like to introduce the speakers. We have with us right now Josephine Gray. Please raise your hand, Josephine Gray, for those that don't know you. And welcome to this event. We appreciate you coming. Yeah, I don't know that. Okay. And we also have Jesse Goldwyn. Is that how I pronounce your name, or am I pronouncing it wrong? Is it Goldwyn or Gollum?
Gollum.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being here too. And we also have Anthony DeMarco here. So, okay, we would like to hand the microphone over to Anthony DeMarco first, and he will put on his, give his little spiel, okay? So give him your undivided attention, please. You got about 15 minutes.
Oh, I might not need that long.
Okay, that's good.
I don't want to keep people from their from snacks later either. So. I'm gonna pass these out to begin with, if you don't mind. These are. I think we'll start from here and get them going around, or maybe you can start here and I'll pass them to the table behind you. So, a couple of the things I was asked to talk about. I'm here. I'm the president of the Hamilton District Labour Council, and the Labour Council represents somewhere between 60 and 70 union locals across the city. You might not think that unions specifically are impacted by some of the issues that you're talking about today, but trust me, there are plenty of unionized workers that are being hit by this government with regards to minimum wage. You might think that because you're a union worker, there's no way you can make minimum wage. There are plenty of union workers that make minimum wage. We have union workers who work in grocery stores, some of them who work in food services, some of them who work as cleaners, custodians, security, a whole bunch of different jobs where they are fighting against minimum wage decreases all the time. Beyond that, we had a government who, after they got unelected, a Liberal government for years and years and years, were being pushed by labor and pushed by worker groups to improve working conditions. A lot of people say that, the Liberals were benevolent in giving this to workers. After 15 years in government, they were benevolent in giving this to workers right before an election. Trust me, it was a hard-fought battle. Bill 148, which is a bill that we're still living under now for the next maybe week or two, was a hard-fought struggle by not only the labor movement, but also especially a group called 15 in Fairness, which is a group of grassroots workers from all over Ontario who pushed for these labor changes. And there were some good changes in there. It wasn't fantastic, but it was good. $14 minimum wage last year, $15 minimum wage January 1st this year. A lot of people are, I mean, you hear small businesses crying that $15 minimum wage is way, way too much. And we know what the living wage is in this city. The living wage is above $15. Can you imagine in Toronto? Living wage is probably close to $20 right now. For people to be screaming that $15 minimum wage is too much, I've responded to many small business owners who have come to me because they're the ones who cry the hardest. And I get that it's tough to run a small business. But in my mind, if your business plan involves keeping your employees in poverty, it is an unethical business plan. Plain and simple. If you can't have an employee that if they work 37.5 hours or 40 hours a week, do a full-time job, if they are living in poverty, that is a huge, huge problem. So, I do want to talk about some of the improvements that Bill 148 had made and are about to be stripped from us. There are going to be other people who can speak here, certainly to basic income and with regards to OW and ODSB. Some of the basic things, though, when it comes to work and jobs that are going to be stripped over the next 2 weeks by the Ford government, this is an all-out assault on working-class people everywhere. It's not just unionized or ununionized workers. It's not just people who aren't able to work right now. It's an assault against working-class people everywhere. So, Doug Ford about to scrap the $15 minimum wage increase. Leave it at $14 and say he'll start indexing it in 2020. We know $14 is woefully underfunded for somebody to live on one full-time job. That you would have to have 1.5 to 2 jobs just to get above the average things that you need on a monthly basis. In the past, and up until now, workers who are in temp agencies, who are in home care and community services, couldn't sign union cards to unionize. Under Bill 148, that was allowed. That's being stripped. So some of the most vulnerable workers who work in some of these facilities, and maybe some of you in the room here have worked for home care and community services, it's really tough to unionize those places. It's really tough to unionize any place. It's especially tough to organize there because oftentimes you never see the other people who you're working with. You could be sent out on assignment for the entire day. You come back to the office, you sign your sheet, and you don't know anybody else who works there. So it makes it really, really difficult. It provided for, Bill 148 provided for pay equity. In other words, if you were doing the same work, but part-time, you would get paid the same as the person who's doing it full-time. That's important because you've probably all been in workplaces where instead of hiring the one full-time person, they hire 3 part-time people and they try and pay them less. When you cheapen the value of a job, it makes it easier to hire part-time people. We know that it's all better for us if there are more full-time jobs out there and less part-time jobs out there. Because if you have to deal with scheduling for 3 part-time jobs, that's really, really problematic. That is going to be disappearing under a Doug Ford change. Employers must pay 3 hours wages when shifts are canceled with less than 48 hours notice. That was put in under Bill 48. It is going to be stripped. It allowed people to actually plan their lives. And along with that, there was protections against you saying no to emergency shifts. So in other words, if somebody called you up an hour before and said, we need you in now, if you said no, under Bill 148 you were protected. Doug Ford is stripping that away. So technically you can be written up if you don't accept a shift, even on 1 hour's notice. There was emergency leave days and paid domestic and sexual violence. For survivors of domestic and sexual violence, there were paid days for that. Those are being stripped. Not completely. They're still offering you non-paid days in a couple of cases. So you can have a couple of non-paid days, but you can't have any paid days. And we know that so many vulnerable workers and so many vulnerable people out there, marginalized people, need those protections. Even though we said Bill 148 is good, $14 minimum wage with a $15 minimum wage increase, there were still some workers that weren't going to get paid minimum wage. And there was a sector of workers, whether they were food servers, whether they were alcohol servers, who weren't going to make the minimum wage because they were exempted from it. Ultimately, as far as we're concerned in the labor movement, if you're working, you make a minimum wage. It's one minimum wage, and we have to fight together to keep that as high as we can. The 15 in Fairness movement started as $11 way, way back. And it slowly crept up, $12, $13, $14, $15. And over that time, from $11 to $14 to $15, the minimum wage didn't increase. It barely increased. Under a 15-year liberal term, it did not increase at all. The value of a minimum wage these days compared to the value of a minimum wage 30 years ago is way below what it used to be in terms of your buying power, in terms of your cost of living. Even though the dollar value is different, the amount that you could do with it. I mean, think about, many of you have lived in this city for a long time. I grew up in this city. I'm about to turn 50 next week. And I can tell you that you all remember a time in this city when one person in your family working full-time, you could buy a house, you could put your kids through school, you could pay for the food you need, you could pay for your hydro, your water, you could pay for all of that stuff. All of that you could pay for on one full-time salary. Heck, you could buy a house. That first point I said, that doesn't happen anymore. One full-time salary doesn't buy a house in this city. Forget about how much you're making. I mean, in this city, you have to be making a couple $100,000 a year to afford a house on one salary. I know a lot of you are coming at it from the perspective of having been in the workforce for a long time. But I also want to give you the perspective of one of the great work groups that we have going with the Labour Council right now is a Young Workers Work Group. And we've got people on that committee anywhere who are 16 years old up to 25, 26 years old. When you imagine how the repeals to this are going to impact them, I mean, everyone likes to, pardon the expression, everyone likes to take a crap on the millennial generation. They're going to get hit by this just as hard. When it comes to decreasing the minimum wage, what does that mean for them if they're going to school? That means their student loans go up. And don't buy into the fact that a government who says that they're going to make tuition free, like the Liberals did. It wasn't free. It was free for a very small segment of people. And needy people, no doubt, who could use that. But most people didn't get to buy into the full benefits of that. Who needs help more when it comes to scheduling on shifts for young people? They're trying to deal with maybe a post-secondary education or a high school education, trying to deal with family, trying to deal with all those things. They're the ones who get scheduled in for probably the worst shifts possible. They need help like that. I know it's hard to necessarily think of a group of 16-year-olds to 25-year-olds who often get painted as entitled. But trust me, and this is the one thing that we've been working on with the Labour Council for the past 4 years, if we're not all willing to accept a little bit of humility here and accept the fact that the only way that we're going to win these battles is by working together, and that is across ages, that is across racialized communities, marginalized communities, unionized workers, non-unionized workers, if we're not willing to come together as a working class, which is 95% of this city, then we are in deep, deep trouble. They will do anything they can to divide us. They will try and divide us by race, they will try and divide us by class, they will try and divide us by age, they will try and give something here and take something away here, so that some people feel like they have that little bit of extra privilege. When I cringe when I hear people talking about reducing taxes. Because when you reduce taxes, you can bet the first thing that's going to happen is your OW and ODSP are going down. When the carbon tax got repealed, that was billions of dollars that were going to come into the system in Ontario. You can believe or not believe in the environmental issues that are going on right now. You can say that I don't believe that this is going to happen. I don't believe. Ultimately, that's billions of dollars that was going to get fed into the social net in this province that is not going to be fed into it anymore. It's going to affect education. They canceled school repairs across the city, across the province. They canceled hospital repairs across the city, across the province. This was money that was going to come from a carbon tax. Please, if you take anything away today, understand that any taxes should be well used, yes. Shouldn't be wasted, yes. But that so much of what we count on, if they say, we're going to give you a tax cut, and we're going to give you an extra $200 a year, that may sound fantastic. Where's it coming from? Because the books still have to be balanced. They're taking it out of healthcare. What now do you have to pay that you didn't have to pay before? If they're taking it out of education, What now do you have to pay that you didn't have to pay before? All of these are important. There's one big pot of money, and it comes from taxes. Anyone who ever asked me, I had politicians coming to my door during the municipal election a couple of weeks ago saying, you know, but you don't want your taxes to increase, do you? It's like, sure. As long as it helps to pay for the people in this city to have a better life, increase my taxes. I live a life of incredible privilege compared to most people in this city, and I'm prepared to help pay for that. And there are people who might need that help right now, who 10, 20 years from now might be in a position of privilege as well, and I hope that at that time they're willing to help pay for that. We have to be together on this. If we get split, we are in such deep trouble. One of the reasons that I come out, and I'm happy to come out to events like this and talk with you instead of just talking in front of, trust me, every month I can stand in front of a bunch of union people and I can talk to them and I can raise my voice and get applause and I can pound my fist in the air. I can do that if I want to. It's not about that. Before I'm union, before I'm labor, I'm a working class Hamiltonian. That's what I care about. And my job, if I can help in any way, shape, and form, is to help get all of us raised up. And with this government, it's going to be a fight. And I'm willing to stand by as many of you as I can to try and help get that fight won. That's going to take a while. But I'm asking you to keep your ears open as well, and keep your thoughts open, because even though you may look at union members and people in organized labor as people with privilege, ultimately, if we're divided, no one's going to win. We have to work together. And that's with all communities. We've been reaching out with neighborhood associations, community groups, cultural groups, wherever we can reach. It has to be that 95% of working class people, like I said. If it's not all together, we're in really deep trouble. I encourage you, if you have time over the next couple of days, get in touch with your MPPs. Let them know that you are against Bill 47, which is the bill that's going to repeal all of these things. The only MPP we have in this city that is conservative is Donna Skelly. She's up in Flamborough-Glanbrook. I don't know how many of you live in Flamborough-Glanbrook. Maybe one of you. I would encourage you to get in touch with her as soon as possible and let her know that you're against this. But I would encourage all of you, if you have the ability to email or a phone call the Premier's office. Tell them that you're against this. Are they going to like their phone lines getting flooded or their emails getting flooded? Probably not. But it's the least which some of us can do. And when you hear about initiatives coming up, and there are some coming up all the time. For instance, tonight there's a 15 in Fairness meeting at the ATU Hall, which is the Amalgamated Transit Union Hall, talking about how do we fight back against this agenda? How do we fight back against this? There are solidarity groups and there are coalitions being started all the time. If you find out about one, join one. The fight back is necessary.
Yay!
So, when I get applause, I know when it's to end. So I'm going to cut it off there, and I will pass it over. I don't know if you need to do another introduction. So thank you.
That was good.
And we have a round of applause for Anthony Place. What a powerful speaker he is. Thank you very much, Anthony. Now we're going to turn it over to Josephine Gray. She's from the Low-Income Families Together, or what is better known as LIFT. So we'll hear from her next, thank you. And just as a side, right after the speakers are finished doing their spiel, we will have a period for any questions you may want to put towards them. So Josephine, your turn. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be back in Hamilton. You guys lift my spirits. It's a good turnout. And I know from having visited many times over the years that your city has a tendency to work in solidarity better than most. And that's extremely important. I want you to know that those of us in Toronto who are being priced out of existence, we know a lot of our artist friends and various people are moving here just to be able to get by. So, you know, this city is very important. And the spirit of this city is incredibly important, especially at a time that we're facing. I think we all know that as the cuts come out, there's definitely going to be damage. There's no question that there's going to be damage. And as the brother said here, we have to be able to work in solidarity with each other. We can't allow any kind of divide and conquer to continue. I feel that Hamilton is pretty far ahead of the curve on overcoming that divide and conquer. I think something that isn't often put forward as we engage in these struggles, that we need to have some really deep thinking about the kind of system we're up against. I think we end up, because our daily existence relies and depends so much on systems that are increasingly breaking down, it gets very difficult to know where to put the energy and where to put the focus. And I think, while I, of course, I personally am on disability, and of course I support increasing the rates. At the same time, I got very involved in the basic income movement, and I will remain involved in that because I feel that it is one of those bigger changes that would help to address a lot of issues across society. I feel that, however, even that basic income movement also needs to take an even deeper look and figure out what it is we need as a foundational solidarity principle. I find it interesting that, last week I spoke, or 2 weeks ago I spoke at a university class of 200 people. And I asked them, how many of you have heard of the Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights? And one person raised their hand. I'm going to ask this crowd, how many of you have heard of the Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights? A few of you. Some of you because you heard from me. So this matters because this is an international human rights treaty that was signed and ratified by Canada that binds all levels of government and all institutions. It confers upon us, as people living in Canada, the responsibility to defend, protect, and try to uphold and hold our governments accountable to these rights. Let me just give you a quick overview, and you'll see why they matter to me so much. The first principle is self-determination, which says, basically, if Hamilton chooses to, for instance, open a public bank so that all your tax revenues are handled in a public bank and you're not losing a huge percentage of it to private banking interest rates, then Hamilton has the right to do that because self-determination is the thing. In the second article, it says that the maximum available resources available to society and government must be invested in upholding and realizing human rights. Article 3 says that these human rights are interdependent, indivisible, and no one can be left out or left behind. This is critically important because when you look at our own human rights code, it basically covers all kinds of alleged grounds of discrimination. But if you happen to be poor, good luck. Because there is no protection on the ground of poverty. So if you can't afford to engage in the justice system, too bad for you. And I've seen way too many examples of how this goes down. So even though discrimination may have ended you in a position of poverty, you do not have any defense. And that goes for the Canadian as well as the Ontario Code. There is a little exception in Section 7 of the Charter, but we'll get to that later. The Covenant goes on to say that we have the right to fair wages. We have the right to choose our livelihood. We have the right to leisure. We have the right to special protections for families so that making sure that people who are raising families have what they need to be able to raise their children. We have the right to income security when in need, and not just because you somehow managed to qualify for a narrow computer program decision. Income security is a basic right. We have a right to an adequate standard of living. So if you translate that backwards, it means that wages have to provide you an adequate standard of living. Income security has to provide you an adequate standard of living. That adequate standard of living includes decent, secure housing. It includes healthy, unadulterated food. So not cheap junk food, which is all a lot of people can afford, but actual, real, healthy food. And furthermore, those that produce and grow that food should also be able to have a decent livelihood, shouldn't they? Just saying. I also think that, the folks who live a little north of you in Six Nations ought to be able to have clean water, like most of our cities and towns do. That's pretty brutal. They're just right next door. How come they don't have water? This solidarity thing, we really have to look at human rights as a solidarity movement and look at all of those issues. And it's great though, because once you just put that challenge out, you're covering all of those grounds. It also goes on to say that we have the right to a higher standard of health care, which doesn't mean, we will continually strip the Medicare system until people have to pay more and more and more and more to get basic coverage. It doesn't mean that, they'll give you the cheapest, worst kind of care because that's all we can afford anymore. It means that if we know that there are ways of providing health care, for instance, prevention, like making sure people have healthy food, then that's what we should be doing. Health care is not just about treating the symptoms after the fact, it's about preventing illness in the first place, which obviously requires an adequate standard of living. Obviously requires dignity. People have to be able to have a sense of freedom from fear or want if they're going to remain healthy. This covenant also talks about the right to free education or accessible education at the post-secondary level. And what's really important about this particular article is that it very specifically states that all people should be educated about their human rights, because how else can a society work towards human rights if they're not aware of them? It's impossible, right? And that's where we have fallen down a black hole of ignorance in this country. Nobody knows these rights exist. Nobody knows these rights are ours to fight for, because they've denied the education of these rights. In the late 90s, our education system was rapidly improving and becoming more and more progressive. The Harris government came in and specifically deleted curriculum relating to human rights, Indigenous people, Indigenous history, equity, and diversity. They specifically and intentionally eliminated that from the curriculum. So now we have a whole bunch of young people who have no idea about our real history and about our rights. And that's very important. It also goes on to say that we have the right to participate in and benefit from the creation of culture. Culture is what makes society and life worthwhile. And people shouldn't just be passive consumers of culture. People should be able to engage in cultural activities, and they should be able to enjoy the benefits of that, and science and technology as well. Once upon a time, there used to be a rule that everybody had to be able to have a telephone because you needed it to communicate. Good luck with that now. I know there's many, many people in rural areas across this country who are pretty much cut off from our modern system of communications. So they have no ability to engage in democracy, in fighting for their rights, in even providing evidence that things are going horribly wrong for people in rural communities. So we have a situation now where a country that is lauded worldwide as a champion of human rights has essentially degraded and gone regressive to the point where, when I reported all of this to the United Nations in '98, the United Nations said Canada is one of the worst violators of human rights in the world. Why? Because we were almost there. We had a lot of things in place, and they were stripped away, largely by the corporate coup d'etat that has taken over North America, largely by the corporatization of government, corporatization of society, driving everything and everyone into increasingly fragmented little units of isolation, so that A, people can't come together and help each other, but also everybody has to buy their own stuff, right? It's a logic model for profit. So to divide everybody up and make everybody alone, so everybody has to have their own fridge, stove, food, etc. It's a great way to make a lot of money. And then you can turn the people who are then damaged and wounded by all of this disastrousness into basically revenue generators for broken systems. And unfortunately, some large organizations that rely on a client base continually churning through their doors in order to get their funding and their revenue. This is broken, this is backwards, this isn't how things were, and this isn't how things should be. And I think what we need to be doing at this point in time, when we're facing a government that is this brutally ignorant and callous and careless, is to remind everyone and each other that we're better than this, and we can do better than this. And this country has absolutely the means, the resources, the ability, the capacity to do far better than this. We can't allow people to say to us, well, because you're not working, or because you're not wealthy, you're not worth anything. We can overcome that. I think all of us in this room know better, but we need to be very vocal about it. I think what's really, really important is to understand that we are being ruled by a technocratic bureaucracy that has no comprehension of the realities behind the numbers that they're looking at. So we now, for instance, have a WSIB system that is using an automated system to bring in cases, and then sometimes 400 or 500 days goes by and the person who applied is already dead before the case is resolved and there's some kind of payout. And this was paid into. This is an insurance program. You know, it's a social program, it's also an insurance program. And these kinds of evils are just being multiplied daily. You know, the things that our brother here was talking about. I live in a community of immigrants, blue Canadians, who come in with higher education and all kinds of skills and abilities that could be helping to build a beautiful society. And they're relegated to lots of little part-time jobs or nothing, and treated like dirt. And it's really, really, really tragic to see how their work is undervalued. They go to temporary agencies, and sometimes they're not even paid at all. And they don't know what little accountability mechanisms they are. They don't know where to go or how to fight for their rights. So it's really convenient to drag all these people here, lie to them and say that they can be a doctor when they get here. And then when they get ripped off by a temp agency, they're just left to sink. My community has the highest rate of suicide, probably anywhere, but it's never counted. Because these people throw themselves off the balcony, and this community is so afraid to speak out that they don't speak up, because they don't know what's going to happen to them. They've been told that if they admit that they're struggling to feed their children, they can have their children taken away from them. And why is that? Because the Children's Aid needs to have lots of children coming through in order to sustain its funding, because it's on this broken, backwards profit model. So there are a lot of changes that need to be made, big changes that need to be made. And I really say that while, yes, we should fight for increase in the current rates, and we should definitely do everything we can to prevent rollbacks, we also have to fight for things to be completely changed to the point where we actually have some accountability. We need to reintroduce standards in this country, standards below which no government can drag us. We need to have standards like a basic livable income, that they cannot drag us below that standard. We need to have accountability mechanisms so that when we face horrendous human rights violations, as many of us have and we see all around us, there is somewhere to go and someone to help and someone to support getting those rights, getting those rights met, but also giving people compensation and support to rebuild their lives. We have to fight for justice. We have to fight for survival. And ultimately, I feel that recognizing that the current system is not only damaging us in the present day, is not only creating a lot of pain and suffering now, it is heading us towards very likely extinction. It is destroying our environment, it is destroying our air and our water. Climate change is not something that will happen. Climate change is here, it is now. It is happening all over the world. I see people coming from all over the world because their homeland has been devastated by climate chaos and there's nowhere to live anymore. So they come here. They know that this is one of the safest places left in the world that will last longer than most in terms of being able to grow food and have clean water. This is precious. We are not only protecting ourselves, we are protecting the future, we are protecting our children, we are protecting the ecology that supports life, other creatures, all of the things that the Creator made for us. We can be protecting that by demanding human rights and by saying that those human rights rely on a clean, healthy ecology. So climate change, climate chaos, which we're already experiencing, has to be a big part and big focus of this. And that, I think, helps us to come together even across the 95%, even perhaps up into that upper 5%, who have to live on this planet too, you know, and start saying we need radical change. We need very radical changes. Ironically, though, it's not that radical to say that we should have public banking so that public money is in public hands. It's not radical at all. In fact, it's our constitutional right. It's not radical to say that we should have an adequate standard of living and a basic income. In fact, it's our human right, and it's been ratified as our human right in our name for decades. You know, it's not radical to say that we should have healthy, sustainable communities. We've been talking about this for many decades. Somehow, you know, people forgot about that as not only a possibility, but a necessity. It's not radical, it's in fact evolutionary, but it's also conservative, ironically. Talk to conservatives about what we're trying to conserve. We're trying to conserve the ability to survive as a species. We're trying to conserve the ability to have healthy, livable cities, to conserve opportunity and equality of opportunity. So therefore, once we start invoking human rights, once we bring these human rights into the court systems, in front of politicians, once we tell them, you know, Canada signed an agreement that your job as a politician, an elected official, who we pay to serve our interests, your primary duty and job is to uphold, protect, and defend our human rights. That's your job, and we're paying you to do it. Do not approach them as people who we hope will give us a favor. Approach them as the people who have been elected and are making a livelihood out of meeting our needs and our interests. We cannot be shy, we cannot be afraid. And when we say that we are human rights defenders, when we demand human rights across the board, then we're standing in solidarity with everyone else whose rights are being threatened or undermined or violated. It's an automatic thing when we do it that way. And the other thing that happens when we insist and demand on human rights, whether you wear a hijab or whatever your last name is, they cannot call you a terrorist. Because all you're doing is demanding the law. You are demanding the law. You are demanding that they obey the law. It is lawful resistance. And it has to be sustained. It has to be continuous. And those of us that have the time and also the memory of what's been robbed of us and robbed from our children need to make these points over and over and over again. Because as it spreads, as the realization spreads, that what's happening now is fraudulent, is rapacious, is evil, and isn't necessary, and is not something that is natural at all. Once people start understanding that en masse, change will happen. It has to happen. And we actually don't have any choice. We are running out of time. So all I can say is, you know, people down south in the evil empire that's going on, sinkhole, are saying we need sustained, ongoing civil disobedience. We need sustained, ongoing activism. We need to raise our voices continually every day. And one of the ways that we do that is by supporting projects like Jesse is engaged in, where we are bringing the reality and the truth of people's stories to overcome the technocratic number crunching, to overcome this idea that it costs us to support people. It does not. This is investment. When we invest in healthy families and healthy communities and healthy societies, we are investing in a healthy economy. When you strip money away from people, the small businesses fail because there's nobody to buy their stuff. You know, it's just this ridiculous misunderstanding that investing in people's purchasing power is somehow a waste. That's absurd. The more money we pump into the economy, the more healthy the economy becomes. The more it circulates, the more vibrant it is. Any of us who's getting older knows we need our blood circulation and our heart to beat, right? Well, the same thing goes for our society. So, it's time to overcome any kind of fear. Don't let anybody tell you, well, that's not realistic. No, it may not be what you want, but it's definitely realistic. It's far more realistic than your fantasies of somehow the 1% surviving as the rest of us die off in a planet where there's nothing left. That's unrealistic. That's really insane. So, you know, I can't say I'm in a great mood. My mother died last week. I'm just devastated. One of the reasons I'm devastated is she was an artist who struggled to maintain and make her own way in the world. She was a beautiful person. She knew about climate change. She knew about all these things. I'm carrying on her memory. I'm carrying on her legacy by doing this work. What makes me angry is that it was so hard for her to survive in her older years. It was so hard for me to help her in her older years. And this to me is a crime. We need intergenerational solidarity. We need to support our elders. We need to value our elders, and we need to connect them to the youth and work together. We are the people who have the memory, the energy, the time, and we need to work very strongly together. And with that, I want to pass it over to Jesse.
Now that was a powerful speech there. It was full of so much enthusiasm. So can we really keep what he has said really strongly in mind? Now I'd like to hand it over to Josie. Jesse, oh, there I go again, get things mixed up. Pardon me, it's with my age.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Jesse, and she's with basic income. And this is a section that really we need to pay attention to. She's a participant of it, and she can give us a good rundown on what it's like to be on basic income. So give her your full attention, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's just in particular, Josephine, I have chills right now, so thank you. You are one of my heroes. So yes, I am a recipient of basic income. Is there anybody else in the room who is also a recipient of basic income? I imagine there are.
Right here?
Hi. So I know that we know in particular as Hamiltonians the impact that this has as the premature cancellation of the pilot. So this was a small, it was a project that involved 4,000 people, and Hamilton was one of the cities. And I remember the day that I found out I was receiving basic income, my very first thought was, my rent is covered. And it was just the biggest sigh of relief and just the biggest, a load was lifted off of my shoulders. And I imagine many of you might understand that load that I'm talking about, that stress that comes with the disease that is poverty. Poverty is a disease. It's random, it can affect anybody at any age, in any economic landscape. It can strike without warning, and when it affects you, it ruins, it takes up all of your mental energy, it takes up all of your life, and that energy that can be spent creating, innovating, building a better world is spent just trying to survive. Poverty is a disease. And before I was on basic income, I was working 4 jobs. I was up in the morning, I had 1 job in the morning all the way to the afternoon. Afternoon to the evening, I would be teaching piano all evening. I wouldn't get home until late at night, and I would get home and I would be exhausted. And in between that, I'm trying to build a photography business. I'm working at Photographers Without Borders. I'm emailing and scheduling meetings. I'm making phone calls. So it was a very stressful existence. And basic income, that stress relief, that load off my shoulder, my rent is covered, I can just focus on those. I had that energy finally to create, to build a better world, and to contribute to society. And then, of course, we know what happened next, that it was canceled prematurely. So Doug Ford went on the record multiple times. He made election promises during his campaign, and he said specifically he wasn't going to cancel basic income. We cannot normalize lying politicians. I say this everywhere I go, and I don't care who it is, because so many people have said to me, well, what do you expect? It's Doug Ford, he's a crook and all this stuff. Of course he's going to lie. We cannot normalize lying politicians. As Josephine said in her talk, we pay them. That we use our taxpayers' money. We are their bosses. They are accountable to us. And I want Doug Ford to know my name. I want him to know who I am. I want him to know that I'm furious at what he did. So the source of my fury is multifold. It's visceral. My survival is at stake, and my survival is threatened because of a rich white man sitting in the Ontario legislature making decisions and stealing my money. But also that, now I have to go back to 4 jobs. And now I have to go back to that stressful existence. Now I have to go back to poverty. And I'm furious because it's not just me. There's 3,999 other people, and they're all going to suffer. And how they've treated us is deplorable, and I'm sure you know, because some of you who are here who are on basic income have experienced this. We never got any direct communication. When they made the announcement on July 31st, all they said is, we are going to cancel basic income. No reason why that would have any basis in evidence or fact, and no idea what that cancellation would look like. So for the entire month of August, all of us were terrified, thinking, are we going to receive August payment? We don't know. We're banking on that money. We planned our lives around this, and now it's been taken away from us. So that was horrible. And then they finally announced that they're going to end the payments in March, but still, people are going to be locked. People are locked into leases and apartments that they can no longer afford. And a lot of people are going to suffer. And again, no direct communication. We didn't get any emails, we didn't get any letters in the mail. We finally got 1 letter in the mail in October. So that's over 2.5 months after they made this announcement. And anybody who doesn't watch the media or doesn't follow the media, if they were on basic income, they would have had no idea and no chance to have any voice in that. And then I'm also furious because we're trying to dream of a better world. The way that automation and technology and AI is building our world right now, it's taking away work from people, and we're seeing it already. You go into a grocery store, and instead of seeing cashiers, you see self-serve checkouts. You go into a McDonald's, instead of seeing servers, you see kiosks, so you press buttons and order your burger there. I haven't gone into a bank in months. We don't need bank tellers anymore because we can do all of our banking online. This is happening. Instead of having factories, having people work at factories, we can have robots building all these things. And in that way, it is a very good idea. It's very good to take away that kind of, to put that sort of labor into robots so that humans have more time to create, to imagine a better world. But then what is the answer for money? And I'm not sure what the answer is, but basic income was certainly a conversation. It was certainly a very good and compelling idea, and economists all over the world were watching us. They were watching Ontario, they were watching this project, because then, instead of speculation, we would have answers and a further conversation. So, when this was happening, I thought to myself, well, hell hath no fury like a photographer scorned. And I had to act fast. So I started making call outs to people. I wanted to find people who were on basic income. And I wanted to take their portraits. So I have pictures of them holding cardboard signs, handwritten with marker, saying, well, what were you using basic income for? And this became a photo project. Its name is Humans of Basic Income, and it grew very, very quickly and took a life of its own. So a lot of these portraits, they have gone viral. I've seen them, they've been covered by the CBC, the Toronto Star, Hamilton Spectator, the Huffington Post. I swear to God, CBC loves me. Like, they've had me on multiple times for interviews and write-ups all the time. And so, like, I realized, like, imagine we want to see some of the portraits, and we're kind of working on getting that set up. So I have Tom here. I can sort of help you kind of when I'm done. Yeah. So after I'm done this talk, I'll show you guys some of the portraits, if that works. So increasingly, I was realizing, like, I started in Hamilton. I started in my home city, and I thought, well, if I have to be effective, I have to go to all these other cities. There are people on basic income in Brantford, in Lindsay, and Thunder Bay, and I need to meet those people. And so I started talking to people in those other cities. And I was able to get to Brantford, and I was able to get to Lindsay. And I thought, well, how am I going to get to Thunder Bay? There's no way I can afford a flight there. But then the Thunder Bay Legal Clinic sponsored me to go up there to take pictures and meet people. So I was able to achieve portraits in all 4 cities and learn about the stories of these people who are on basic income. These portraits have been exhibited in Hamilton at Supercrawl. They've been exhibited in Toronto. They're currently in Kingston, but I'm getting them back this week because I'm looking to get them exhibited again in Toronto, but at Queen's Park. I'm also looking at Ottawa. Like, the next idea is, like, well, if this government is going to not take it up, then maybe the federal government will take it up. So Doug Ford definitely knows my name by now, but what if Justin Trudeau learns my name? And what if Justin Trudeau learns our stories? And what if the federal government learns about the stories that are happening right here? And I want this to be an election issue next year, and it's already beginning. Jagmeet Singh, who's the leader of the NDP party, has already publicly called on Trudeau to reinstate the basic income pilot. Elizabeth May, who's the leader of the Green Party, has also put a call out in an open letter along with Mike Schreiner, who's the leader of the Ontario Green Party. And this issue needs to extend beyond party lines, and it already is. People from the Liberals, NDP, and Green have been very, very supportive of me in this issue, and they've been united in this, and I need them to continue being united in this. So it's been a very interesting time. Like, needless to say, I'm telling you all of this stuff. My life got a little weird. This has become way bigger than a portrait series. This has become an effort to save a movement, to gather data, and to bring forward a conversation on the world stage about what would basic income look like. One of the biggest things I learned from doing this portrait series and from meeting all these people is that we are living in very scary times. Like, the elements that created Doug Ford did not happen overnight. We are still in recovery from the cuts from the Mike Harris government to social services that I'm sure many of you know and experience and have as part of your lived experience. And the Liberal government in the last 15 years, they did not do enough to restore social programs and funding. They acted too slow to alleviate the suffering of the most vulnerable in Ontario. OW and ODSP, as I'm sure you're well aware, are woefully inadequate social services that only really serve to keep people in poverty And people on those systems are still forced to decide, do I pay my rent or do I buy food? Do I pay my bills or do I buy food? It's a matter of survival instead of being able to thrive, and that is a detriment to everybody in our society. Poverty, like I said, poverty is a disease. That disease as poverty costs our province $38 billion per year. And what if people had a basic income and they weren't having to spend taxpayers' money on long-term health care issues and illnesses in hospital beds because they had access to clean food? And what if you had a basic income? There's a direct link between poverty and crime, so that people aren't committing crimes and they aren't spending taxpayers' money in jail. What if that happens? So when they announced the cancellation of basic income, they also announced 100 days to reform social services in Ontario. Day 100 is November 8th. That is 3 days away, guys. That's 3 days away. And I know for a fact that the Minister, Lisa MacLeod, has done 0 consultations with any social service provider at all. And and I know for a fact that they have announced that multiple times that the solution to poverty is a job. And so I feel like,
That's a lot.
I feel like what she's doing is she's spending those 100 days calculating what can we cut and where. And mark my words, and this is proven again and again, when social services get cut, people die. I'll say that again. Social services, when they get cut, people die. So we live in very dangerous times. And we're living in these times where these views are getting increasingly polarized, and the poorest of our society are being the ones that are targeted the most. A lot of the people who have opposed my project, a lot of the comments I see use the same language and rhetoric, and those languages that they're using are words like leech and parasite. They're dehumanizing terms. They literally say our value and worth as humans is directly related to how much we contribute to society economically. If you don't contribute in a way that is satisfactory, you're not a human, you're a parasite. You're sucking away taxpayers' money. We see this throughout history. When dehumanizing language is used, it opens the door for the justification of violence. We see dehumanizing language that targets people groups, races, religions, words like cockroach or rat or terrorist. And mark my words, if we don't combat that violence, if we don't look it in the face, if we don't confront it, people will die. And this death may not be as overtly violent as a genocide or a Holocaust, but people will gain long-term health problems that will go untreated because they can't afford good food or safe, clean housing. They will go to jail. Like I said, there's a direct link between poverty and crime. They will kill themselves over untreated mental health issues and the stress and hopelessness that comes with the disease that is poverty. This is deeply serious, and so please be furious with me. Poverty costs our province $38 billion per year. This was a study that was supposed to cost $150 million, and that would have given an answer to the huge cost that is poverty. And that study will be cut prematurely. By the time it's cut, $100 million of that money will have been spent with no data. So that is a waste of taxpayers' money. It literally is a waste of taxpayers' money. There will be no data to show. The study will be cut off, and there will be nothing to show from this, and no conversation that can be had. So I'm terrified that in 3 days they're going to announce more cuts to social services. I don't think my fears are unfounded. I think that based on what we know, based on how the government has treated us in their callous non-communication, complete ignoring of us and our needs, we have to get ourselves ready for cuts. And we have to get ourselves ready for a very, very scary 4 years. So we need to be brave, and we need to be united. I haven't been able to do this photo project myself. There have been people all over the province, people here in Hamilton, friends and strangers who have come along, who have rallied to help me, who have brought me to different places to talk about this cause and bring awareness to the issue, who have helped set up a social, a GoFundMe to pay for this, help fund the exhibits, help get me into exhibits. This is not one-person effort. This is a united effort. And I'm working with CEOs who are interested. I'm working with the academics and the researchers who are part of the team. I'm working with the lawyers who are putting together a lawsuit. So this is a very united effort, and people across all economic landscapes, rich and poor, are stepping forward to help in any way they can and lend all the skills that they can. So it's been a huge process of connecting people and working together to fight this. So despite everything I've said, which is really terrifying, and it is very scary, I have nightmares about it now, I have been inspired, I have been encouraged by the goodness of people who are sharing the portraits and sharing the stories. They've been tweeting, they've been responding, they've been donating their time, their skills, their money, and it's been successful, and that this is way bigger than a portrait series, like I said before, and that the only way we win this is if we stay united and focused. So I need your help now. I need people to continue to stay united. I need you to continue to stay focused on the cause. I need you to help share these stories and help tell these stories. And I want to know why you support basic income. I want to know what you would do with a basic income. How we move forward is we're trying to build a better world here. And it works to build a better world if we work together and we stay united in this. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for your interest and your dedication, and for all the work that all of you are doing on the front lines every day. So thank you, and we don't stop. This is so far from over. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. I got one description for what you were saying. There's two words that go with that. It's called domino effect. And that's what is going to happen if we allow Doug Ford to go ahead with his cut. It's going to affect all of us in one way or another. So now at this point, I would like to hand this over to Sally. She has something to announce, please.
Thanks very much. Okay, now I need that.
I don't think you're powerful.
So most of you we caught when you came in with this letter that we want to get you to sign so we can send a whole bunch of letters to the Minister of Community and Social Services. We did this before with the Liberals, and we think, although it seemed the increases they promised seemed small at the time, they look pretty good now, and we feel that our letters had some effect in there. So we're also bringing new information about the actual cost of food for different types of families, and it shows that the very poorest people on social assistance, who are the singles that don't get anything from the federal government for their children, are really badly off. By the time they pay an average rent for a bachelor apartment, they don't even have enough for food without any of their other expenses. They're $100 short of being able to buy nutritious food. So thank you to those that did sign, and I think I'm going to stay up at this table so that please don't leave without looking at the letter and having a go at signing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. That was very good of you. Thank you. Okay, at this particular moment, we're going to dedicate some time to the audience now. If you have any questions you would like to ask of the speakers up here, we would ask you to stand and just put the question to them. Keep it short, and then we'll let them answer for you. Do we have any questions here? Okay, we got one up the back there. Thank you.
Do you want me to come up?
Yeah, if you could, please. People will probably hear you better.
I'm so happy to be here because, like Jesse said, I am a basic income participant. I'm single. All three of my children are post-secondary educated, and they have well-paying careers. I myself was just recently terminated, and I'm in the healthcare. In fact, I just celebrated 25 years as a therapeutic recreationist, and I'm also a teacher to nurses restorative care. It's been mandated by the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and I am bound by a collective agreement. I'm with SEIU, and you know what? They're not even willing to take it to arbitration. I don't know what to do. I'm on welfare. Ontario Works. I have a union that won't represent me. I have to now go and find a civil lawyer. I don't know. That's why I'm going to ask, Anthony for his help. And for Jesse, I I totally understand where you're coming from. There are no homeless beds. Right now I'm living on the street. I'm living on the street. I just got over a walking pneumonia. My middle one's in policing in Hamilton here. You know what she said to me? You made your bed, now you gotta lie in it. Tough love. Yeah, she got that from my dad. My dad is a millionaire and lives on the mountain. We were raised military, right? When I was 5 years old, if you don't make your bed, you don't eat breakfast. It took me 3 hours to make a proper bed. You know how you do it? The quarter has to bounce.
I know that.
The quarter's gonna bounce. But you know what? I love my family. You know why? Because I wouldn't be the woman I am today. And I'm 46. But I'm telling you, I've been fighting for my life and my freedom because I left an abusive marriage. And I stayed married in that abusive marriage for 22 years. Why? Well, I'm Catholic, number one. And nothing wrong with the Catholics. I love Jesus. But I like them all. I like all the tribes. Whatever you're worshiping, as long as you're not worshiping yourself. And, you know, but for me, it's like I always say, I gotta get up every day, and I gotta go find someplace to eat. I gotta go to the gas station to wash my face and clean myself up head to toe. I mean, I don't think you realize what it's like on the streets. There's so much gangs, guns, and violence, and drug paraphernalia everywhere. I mean, I now know what to see, I know what to look for. I'm the one giving out the gifts, cigarettes, trading for, you know, something, apple juice. I'm telling you, this is what the streets are like. So I don't know. What's my question? Well, that's my statement. My question is, what's my next step? Thank you.
Can you answer that, Anthony?
So, what I can tell you is this, and I certainly can't speak for SEIU, so I'm not going to try, but what I'm going to say is this, that I have problems with my own union. Big unions have become, in many ways, corporate.
Yes.
And there's no way getting around that. That doesn't mean that there aren't good people within there. So what I can certainly commit to helping you do if you want to have that conversation is maybe I can get you in a conversation with somebody who will listen, who is not the person who has shut you down the first time. Because I know sometimes that the pathways are tough because you're probably being told to go back to the same person over and over and over again. Maybe at the very least that I can provide you, because I'm not allowed to, like I say, represent SEIU, the very least I can do is maybe get you in touch with somebody who is different in the organization, who may have that different perspective, or can listen to you from that perspective. And if they're willing to do that, it might mean retelling your story to them, but at least it might mean a fresh take on it, and maybe it's that perspective which will change it. I'm willing to do that. If before we leave today, you want to give me whatever contact, or I'll give you my contact number,
Excellent.
and we'll figure that out.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have anyone else that's got a question at this particular moment? Could I have Elizabeth come forward, please?
I don't know how many of you were able to read the editorial in The Spectator this morning, but it was bloody scary. Andrew Scheer is now calling the press enemy of the people. And we know where we heard that before, down south with those, maniacs. If we let that happen, if we don't stop that in its tracks, then we are lost, and we're going down the path with them down south. We have to stop it now. There's enough people here that we could make an impact. We have your email addresses. If you get an email from the campaign saying, call this number now and express your displeasure, will you do it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because that's one way we can take to counteract this and to stop it. Secondly, there's a bus leaving on November 17th from City Hall. If you want to be on it, we're going to drive to Doug Ford's Deco Labels plant in Toronto. We'll be picking up people in Burlington and joining with people in Toronto, so there should be enough of us to have an impact. November 17th, 10:30, City Hall. So my question is, can you think of anything else that we could do to stop this influx of the evil that's down south seeping over our border?
Thank you, Elizabeth. There is a few things that I have meant to say. I think one of the things that's incredibly important is to, as we just observed with Nancy, the sister who raised her personal crisis, we are revolutionary when we help each other, when we insist on being there for each other. That's incredibly important. They don't want us to do that. So that's the first thing, is that we commit to being there for each other, because, you know, humans as a species always do best when we cooperate and support each other. We are actually like herd animals, not individual predators, right? So that's one thing, is just to be there for each other is incredibly important. As a human rights defender, I find it incredibly empowering to think of my human rights, my family's human rights, and your human rights as all part of the same important ecology that we have to work together in. And one way I think that we help each other move forward is by having a vision of what it is we want, rather than simply putting all our energy into what it is we don't want. So when Andrew Scheer says, you know, the press is the enemy of the people, we talk about how we want the press to do more realistic investigative journalism, and we also provide our own, such as Jesse is doing, so that people can actually see the truth coming out. We provide it ourselves. If they're being cut off at the knees and it's harder and harder for them to get the truth out, we put the truth out. I encourage you to go look at Abby Martin, the Empire Files, online. She's incredible, absolutely incredible. And she encourages people just to take up a little bit of time and energy to put the truth out there as much as we can. We have many alternative means now of communicating with each other, and it's not always that hard. Some of us can go to the library if we have to. The sister who just explained what happened to her, that story should be online for people to see. Why we need a basic income. Well, this is the kind of thing that can happen to somebody who worked so many years in the healthcare profession and now finds herself homeless. These truths have to be out there. They have to be evident, right? Gathering evidence and then working with our legal claims, working with our unions, those that are there, finding the humans within the unions and the legal clinic system. They're still there. We find them, we work solidly and hard, we work together. We don't allow any kind of division to arise between us, because we're going to have to use the courts. We're going to have to use the courts and at the same time the court of public opinion. So when we fight a case, whether that judge, that particular judge, rules in our favor or not, at least the moral issues are on the table for everybody to see. This is the kind of thing we need to use the court challenges program that's been brought back. How many of you knew that? It provides funding for us to do charter challenges. There's a lot of charter challenges to be had right now. Canceling the basic income is the basis, in my view, of a charter challenge. Section 7 says we have the right to frickin' live, not be like squeezed out of the economy until we die on the street. The fact that 40% increase in women seeking shelter in the last 18 months in Toronto is appalling. It's insane. This is supposed to be the best city in the freaking world, and meanwhile women can't find a place to lie down or sit overnight. We need to bring these truths out and not be afraid to do that. So I think creating our own way of bringing out truth, creating our own demands of what it is we want to see in the world, and pushing and pushing and pushing for those demands, and not getting too caught up in railing against what it is we don't want. Obviously, we all know what we don't want. It's been going on for a very long time. So now it is time for us to be all demanding what will benefit everybody. And I think that's incredibly important, not just politically to get people engaged, but also to keep ourselves afloat, to keep our own energy going, because it gets extremely hard to endlessly fight against without something to fight for. So we need that balance, and we need to support each other in keeping that balance. Because it's tough. I know, I've been at it for 30 years. I get really tired. But hey, I get out of bed so I can come here. Because talking to y'all and knowing that I'm not alone and that we're here together in the struggle is what keeps me going. So, you know, using our energy and our power to make clear demands of what it is we insist we are given as a society, as communities, I think is incredibly important piece of it.
She said what I think she's good.
Thank you for that. Okay, at this particular moment, I would like to call on Josie, Rhonda, to, what do you got there, Rhonda? I'll hand the mic over to Rhonda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out and support this worthy cause. As you all know, we are in a hard battle riding the ship. Either the ship sank or it floats, but I think with loving hands, we all will work together to make it stay afloat. I want to thank Anthony, Josephine, and Jesse for coming out. This is no fake news. This is real news. So I want to thank you very much for your words of encouragement and encourage us all together who is in this battle. On behalf of the CAWDB, I want to thank you and with a little token to give you this. Anthony and Jesse. Once again, thank you guys very much. And anyone who wants to come and join the campaign, we have meetings every other Wednesday. We need your support. Thank you. There is snacks at the back. Everyone. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rhonda. Okay, right at this particular moment, we have provided snacks for people. What's that?
Sorry, invite everybody for a second session.
Oh yeah, we have a second session that's going to be coming up in regards to what will come about with this November 8th deal with Doug Ford. We want people to come back to another session on, what's the date?
We will call them.
We will let you know. We'll be putting out announcements and everything about another follow-up to this session. But we really want to wait and see exactly what Doug Ford's going to do and see what cuts he's going to make. If we know they're going to be extensive. So be prepared. We just ask that you be prepared for it. Okay.
There's a sheet here.
Yeah, we have a sheet here for you to sign up on if you want to come to this event.
Okay. And we'll let you know what day or it's going to be. We're going to be talking about it in our meeting tomorrow. Anyway, so we'll be organizing that together. Okay, so please sign up if you think you want to come and hear some more about what's going on with Doug Ford's government. Okay, please. So come and sign up here.
Yeah, okay, we got snack going at the, huh? Yeah. What's that? Yeah, and we do have food in the back. We would like the guests to go first, though, if they like to. Then afterwards, everybody else can. And after within about a half hour, we are planning on doing a march to the OW office to express to them our displeasure with the way Doug Ford is doing things right now. So we would ask, if you'd like to be involved with it, we will be leaving here about 3 o'clock and doing a march over to the OW. Yeah, it's only over here at the OW office, just down the street here, 1 block. Thank you very much. And thanks for everybody coming out to this event. We really appreciate it very much. And keep watching what Doug Ford is going to do. Be prepared.